Okay, this is Mr. Weideman, Lafayette High School, Functions Trig class, Chapter 5, Chapter 5 practice test. If you haven't noticed, this has a lot of trig function graphing problems. In order to do it, there's two key things you have to be able to do. One, you have to know the t-table. Two, you have to understand translations, what they are, and how to apply them. And then if you understand that, then it's just a matter of a different t-table. But if you don't know the t-table, you're dead in the water. If you don't know how to apply translations to your t-table, you're dead in the water. All right, let me show you what I mean. Okay, so let's take a look at this first one. All right, it's a sine function. I need to know the t-table. I need to recognize these coefficients. All right, 3 is the coefficient that we call A. What's in front of the x is what we call B. Your horizontal shift is what we call C. Your vertical shift is what we call D. Now, specific to trig functions, we have these things called amplitudes and phase shifts. All right, your amplitude is merely your A coefficient, the absolute value. All right, that is your vertical stretch as far as transformation. Your B coefficient helps you define your period. Sine and cosine, the period is always 2 pi. Tangent, the period is pi. Need to know that. So it is the period divided by B, which is normally our horizontal stretch or shrink. And then we have a lot of special case horizontal shifts. Okay, it's always C divided by B. Really, really, really important. Otherwise, you're not going to get your horizontal shift correct. And remember, anything in parentheses seems backwards. Okay, so if I'm multiplying something to the x, I end up dividing. If I add, I end up subtracting. That's why we say this phase shift is to the left. That pi over 2 is something that I'm going to actually subtract from my x values. All right, well, all of this is for naught unless we have the t-table. All right, now we did this in class. We wrote down the 6 t-tables that we need to know. So here's our t-table. We defined our A, B, and C. For review, if you need to look back in your foldable, all right, take a look. And remember, there is an order of operations to this. Okay, normally we would divide our x values by b. Don't need to do that because it's 1. Okay, so multiply our y values by 3. Yep, we can do that. It's going to be one of the first things we're going to do. And then our horizontal shift, which is next, and vertical shift, we don't have one. All right, so here I can subtract pi over 2 for my x values, and I can multiply my y values by 3. And this just really has 2 translations. Not so bad. And then that's the t-table that I'm going to plot. And remember, study the scales of our t-tables. These, I kind of use the same scale over and over and over again. So all these ticks on the bottom represent pi over 6. And all these things on top, these tick marks on top, all represent pi over 4s. Okay, so this makes these scales fairly easy to work with. All right, so let's move on to the next one. Cosine function. All right, and you're going to see that this is Same old, same old, same old, same old. Right? They're just going to be a little bit different coefficients, applied a little bit different. Okay, I'm dividing my x values by a half, which is the same thing as multiplying by 2, in our mathematics. A lot of work with fractions here. It's nice to have a piece of scratch paper. And you can always tell if you're doing it right or wrong, because these are what we call periodic functions, meaning they have a pattern. So if you're doing this mathematics and you get a value that kind of breaks the pattern, you did something wrong. Okay, there's our t-table, and plot that. This y scale is left blank for a reason, right? So you can kind of, if it has a vertical stretch like this one does, you can kind of scale that y value to suit your purpose. Notice this is a curve. This is not an upside down V. I don't like that, and I will take off points for it. Okay, number 16 here. That's just a computation. That should be very straightforward. There's your A, there's your B. Don't have a C or a D. It's the sine function. All right, so the period is going to be 2 pi divided by B, and B is kind of a nasty thing there. Dividing, same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. It's just math. Reduce the fraction. Okay, that thing is a give me. What about this guy? This guy is actually super easy. That -2, it's not in parentheses. So that means you apply it to your y values instead of your x values. So that's a vertical shift. And so I'm just merely going to subtract 2 from all of my y values. So that's just one downward translation. So that becomes pretty darn easy problem there. Okay, and again, it's a curve. It's not an upside down V. All right. Well, I'm going to continue this then in the next video, and we'll pick up on the other problems there.